Hey guys, tonight we travel way, way back to a time before porcelain bowls, soft close lids, or the satisfying gurgle of a modern flush. You're squatting on a windy hillside, your only shelter a few boulders, and maybe a goat who's giving you the side eye. This is prehistory, long before plumbing, privacy, or a toilet paper aisle at the grocery store. And the truth is, you probably won't survive this. No, seriously, between the parasites, predators, and poisonous plants, doing your business in the Bronze Age was a full contact sport. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're barefoot on a pebbled path, early morning fog still clinging to the grass. Your belly's rumbling, not with hunger, but with urgency. There's no chamber pot, no hole in the ground someone thoughtfully dug for you. Instead, you hike a few minutes outside your settlement to the unofficial communal dumping zone, a dry patch of dirt and stone, scented with the ghosts of yesterday's meals. You squat low, trying to stay balanced, eyes scanning the landscape. Not for fellow humans. Modesty isn't really a thing yet, but for wolves, or worse, other humans. You finish as fast as you can, using a smooth, flat stone to clean up, if you're lucky. If not, maybe a leaf, a clump of grass, or just, well, you know, there's no sanitation infrastructure here. Waste builds up, slowly leaching into the ground or getting picked at by insects and animals. Historians still argue whether early humans had designated latrine areas or just went wherever nature called. What we do know is that archaeological sites from this era often show soil layers rich in phosphates, organic waste markers, and clusters of parasite eggs in what were once trash heaps. It wasn't all filth, though. Some early communities seem to have chosen toilet spots based on wind direction, sunlight, and drainage, so the smell didn't linger too long near sleeping areas. That's something. But privacy? Not a concern. Imagine trying to use the bathroom in a circle of 20 other people doing the same, chatting about spear tips or fermented berries. In some tribal communities, even today, the idea of toileting alone is what's strange. And don't think you're getting through this without a few awkward encounters. Let's say you grab your favorite poop stone, rounded, smooth, still slightly warm from the sun, and you realize it's the same one your neighbor used yesterday. Do you say something? Is there a stone etiquette? Historians haven't found evidence, but you know someone had to make that awkward call eventually. Oh, and you're not just avoiding humans. There are bugs. Ever heard of the dung beetle? Yeah, that little guy's already making a beeline for your business before you've even stood up. Ancient ecosystems were very efficient. The Bronze Age isn't completely without advances. Some larger settlements, like those in Anatolia, Start experimenting with pit latrines, simple holes dug deeper into the earth, sometimes with stone or clay linings. It's the beginning of controlled waste disposal. Unfortunately, there's no concept of covering it afterward, so flies still throw rave parties. And speaking of parties, waste was often part of communal life. Some early tribes incorporated it into rituals, offering it to gods of fertility or burying it during seasonal festivals. You, meanwhile, are just hoping it doesn't attract a boar. Remember that rocky hillside? If it rained, guess what? Your business might roll downhill, maybe right toward your camp. Slope terrain was your friend and your enemy, and in the absence of soap, well, hand hygiene was largely a shrug and a rinse in a nearby stream. Good luck with the bacteria. Still, these early humans weren't clueless. Over time, they learned that eating downstream from their latrine site equals everyone gets sick. So they adjusted, slowly. Maybe not with scientific precision, but through hard-earned trial and error, and a lot of trial by dysentery. You wrap your fur shawl tighter around your shoulders and trudge back toward camp, hoping someone's made fire. You glance down at your feet. Watch your step. There's no sanitation worker coming by. This landscape is one big, shared, semi-organic minefield. And yet, you survive. You and your tribe thrive. Babies are born, meals are cooked, and waste just becomes part of the land. There's something strangely grounding, literally, in that. By now the stars have risen. The air smells of wood smoke and damp earth. You've taken care of what needed to be done, and tomorrow you'll do it all again, hopefully with a better rock. You'll wake up in a city that didn't exist a few millennia ago. Cradle of civilization, where mud brick houses line narrow alleyways, ziggurats scrape the sky, and scribes shuffle past with reed pens behind their ears. But you've got other things on your mind. You feel the stirrings of what can only be described as ancient urgency. You duck behind a reed screen beside your house. There's a sunken box built into the floor, lined with clay, sloped just enough to drain somewhere you don't want to think about. Welcome to one of the world's earliest toilets. It's not glamorous, but it's progress. These early Mesopotamian latrines were usually tucked inside private homes, which is a huge leap from squatting in the open. In wealthier homes, the toilet drained into a cesspit or into brick-lined drains that led, miraculously, out of the city. Historians still argue whether these systems were consistently functional or just optimistic plumbing, but the evidence is there in the layout of homes and streets. Someone was thinking about waste. Still, you're not alone. You can hear someone humming on the other side of the screen, probably your neighbor, who's also doing their morning business. Privacy is relative. The reed walls rustle in the breeze, letting in light, sound, and probably more than one curious cat. You perch above the opening, knees bent, trying not to let your robe drag. There's no seat, just a hole. You do your best. Beside you is a small pile of smooth pebbles and perhaps some broken bits of pottery, what scholars politely call toilet implements. You pick one that looks the least suspicious. This is where the details get fun. Archaeologists have found shards of pottery with telltale wear patterns near drains and toilet areas. The working theory? Wiping. A reused piece of pottery might have been your only option. It's the Mesopotamian version of reusing a Starbucks cup sleeve, functional, if not exactly comfortable. As you finish, you throw a handful of ash or sand into the pit. That helps with the smell a bit. You quickly rinse your hands in a communal water jar near the doorway. No soap, but the silt in the water might do something. And then you step outside into the buzzing city. Chickens cluck at your feet. A donkey ambles past. Children are already stomping through the alleys. The streets are filled with more than just feet. Waste runs in the gutter channels, carrying off whatever's dumped from houses above. It's not pretty, but it's organized chaos. Some parts of the city are cleaner than others. Public waste pits are scattered around, and it's not uncommon to see someone hauling a sloshing bucket down the street, looking for the nearest one. Municipal sanitation isn't a thing yet, but human labor fills in the gaps, whether they like it or not. If you're rich, and you're probably not, you have servants to clean the latrine and dump it out back. In temples, priests had more elaborate setups, sometimes with a kind of built-in drainage that funneled down from the ziggurat. Historians still debate whether this was for actual waste or symbolic cleansing, but let's be real. After enough sacrifices and festival feasts, someone had to clean up. And speaking of temples, there's a lot of spiritual anxiety around cleanliness. Bodily waste is considered impure in many rituals. Priests might fast before rituals, partly to avoid needing to relieve themselves during sacred duties. Others may have used herbs or special diets to minimize issues. It's practical and holy. You head toward the river, hoping to escape the smell. There's a bathing spot where people also wash clothes, animals, and sometimes their toilet jars. It's all part of the same ecosystem. Hygiene is communal. So are the consequences. There's a fringe theory floating around in modern scholarship that Mesopotamian texts hint at sanitation codes, rules about where to defecate, what to do with waste, even fines for fouling certain areas. But the evidence is fragmentary. Some say the famous Code of Hammurabi included toilet-related offenses. Others argue the references are too vague. Still, the city functions. For the first time in history, humans are living shoulder to shoulder, cooking, eating, and relieving themselves within the same block, and somehow they make it work. You survive another morning, another squat, another strategic pottery shard, and then you wonder, what did they think about their bathrooms? Were they proud, embarrassed? Did they make jokes about whose latrine stank the worst? You'll never know, but chances are someone, somewhere in ancient Ur, made a poop joke. Civilizations rise, sewers clog, but human nature doesn't change. The air smells like crushed myrrh and old sweat. You're in ancient Egypt now, where the Nile glitters in the morning sun and papyrus rustles gently along its banks. You shuffle through the sandy courtyard of a modest brick home, feeling the familiar pressure in your gut. Breakfast was onions, bread, and fish. It's time. Inside the house, tucked into a shaded corner, is your porcelain-free throne. No, seriously, it is a kind of throne. A carved limestone block flat on top with a hole cut into its center, perched over a ceramic jar. Welcome to ancient Egypt's version of indoor plumbing. This isn't just some rough pit. Egyptian toilets, especially in middle to upper class homes, show remarkable thoughtfulness. The limestone seat is smooth, cool against your thighs. There's a ledge for your feet, and maybe a reed mat for modesty. You lower yourself into position and try not to think about what's sloshing beneath you. In wealthier households, this setup might be maintained by a servant. Someone, possibly several someones, whose job it is to empty the jar, clean the stones, and maybe even provide a little scented oil to mask the funk. Think of it as early sanitation staff, with none of the benefits. Meanwhile, if you're part of the 90% who don't live in a home with such luxuries, you're outdoors, crouched over a shallow pit, maybe behind a screen of reeds or beside a garden wall. The term private restroom means very little when your neighbor can see your sandals under the fence. Still, whether rich or poor, everyone understood the importance of some basic sanitation. Egyptians were surprisingly health-conscious. Their medical papyri include all kinds of digestive remedies: garlic for parasites, honey and beer for constipation, and more terrifying concoctions involving crocodile dung and fermented bread, which, to be fair, was also their idea of birth control. We don't recommend trying this at home. Historians still argue whether these practices were based more in medicine or magic. Some treatments read like spell books, with incantations about bowel demons and stomach curses. But others, like hand washing with natron and the use of linen cloths, show surprisingly practical hygiene habits. And about those linen cloths, while the Romans had their infamous shared sponge on a stick, tersorium, many Egyptologists believe ancient Egyptians used cloth scraps for wiping, washed and reused. Probably not super soft, but an upgrade from broken pottery shards at least. You glance around the small room, maybe there's a niche in the wall for your wiping linen. Maybe not. If you're lucky, there's a small bowl of water nearby. A ritual wash might follow, not just for hygiene, but to cleanse spiritually. Waste wasn't just dirty, it was ritually unclean. You didn't want to walk into a temple with unwashed hands. The gods, after all, were picky. And yet, despite the fastidious personal habits, city infrastructure didn't quite catch up. Most homes relied on pots or simple pits. Waste was emptied into designated areas on the city's edge or into the Nile. Yes, the Nile. The same river you drink from, fish from, bathe in, and relieve yourself beside. It's the sacred artery of Egypt, and also, tragically, its toilet bowl. Scholars debate just how intentional this was. Some argue the Egyptians saw the Nile's flow as cleansing, a divine way to carry impurities away. Others suspect it was just convenient, but let's be honest. When the heat's pushing 100 degrees and the city streets are buzzing with flies, the urge to chuck a full pot straight into the river is strong. You exit the house and head toward the riverbank to rinse your hands and face. The ground is sandy, warm. Children splash nearby. Women wash linens, and a cow is doing something unmentionable 3 feet to your left. It's all a bit chaotic, but it works, sort of. And here's a quirky tidbit. Egyptian tombs often included small toilet models, miniature latrines placed among grave goods, so the dead could continue their business in the afterlife. Some even had tiny figures squatting in place. Yes, someone's job was to sculpt toilet dolls for eternity. Talk about legacy. As the sun climbs higher, the city bustles with life. You've done your part, relieved, refreshed-ish, and ready to face another day of chiseling stone, measuring grain, or copying hieroglyphs. And tonight, when the stars rise over the desert, you'll do it all again. Just remember to change the linen. You shift your weight awkwardly on a rickety wooden bench as the warm Nile breeze dances through the woven walls of your reed hut. Outside, papyrus boats glide past. Hippos grunt somewhere in the shallows, and the reeds rustle with the sound of dragonflies and something else. The ancient Egyptian countryside is alive, and so is your stomach. You're not in the city now. This is the rural Nile Delta and your toilet situation. Much less royal. You slide aside the mat covering the corner of the hut to reveal your humble latrine, a wide-mouthed clay pot tucked into a frame of wood and mud brick. There's a pile of sand beside it, a few dusty cloths, and, if you're lucky, a tiny bowl of water. No limestone throne here, no servants, no illusions. Still, this is your toilet. It's personal, practical, and better than squatting in the banana grove next door, where snakes have been spotted. You lower yourself, trying to breathe through your mouth and keep your tunic out of the way. There's no seat, no lid, and no flush. But there is dignity in a routine. The pot itself is called a wup, and similar designs have been found across rural Egypt. Unlike the more fixed setups in upper-class homes, this one is mobile. It can be carried out, emptied, rinsed, reused. Think of it as the ancient equivalent of a composting toilet, low-tech but high utility. After doing your business, you toss in a handful of ash. Ash helps absorb moisture and mask the smell, but it's also part of a more symbolic cleansing. Egyptians associated certain materials with purity. Natron, a mineral salt, was ideal, but ash? Ash was humble, functional, and always available after a cooking fire. You wipe with a scrap of linen cloth. It's frayed, but washed regularly. In poorer homes, cloths were shared between family members. Not ideal, but life in the Delta is full of compromises. At least you're not using shards of ostraka like some city folks. You stand, stretch, and prepare to carry the full pot down a well-worn path toward the reed-lined canal. It sloshes a little. You move carefully. Nobody wants a spill, not because of shame, but because of ants and the occasional crocodile. Did we mention those? Yeah. Watch your step. The disposal area is a sort of community dumping trench dug beside the water where waste can slowly decompose or get washed away by seasonal floods. There's no official sanitation plan, just tradition and trial and error. Historians still argue whether these disposal habits were health-driven or just coincidental. The ancient Egyptians clearly understood that waste needed to go somewhere, and preferably not stay in the home. But whether they connected it with disease transmission, that's murkier. Some medical papyri hint at contamination avoidance, but the Nile's sacred status complicates everything. In villages, toilet pots were sometimes rinsed in the same canals used for drinking and bathing. It wasn't ideal, but the alternative, hauling water from distant wells, was exhausting. So folks struck a balance: rinse downstream, drink upstream, and pray to Hapi, god of the river. You pass a group of women doing laundry. One gives you a nod. Yep, she sees the pot. No shame here. Bodily functions are part of daily life. It's normal. Still, everyone keeps a respectful distance from the trench. Even animals avoid it, which is saying something in a place where goats eat shoe leather. Back at your hut, the air is heavy with the scent of onions and stewed lentils. You set the pot back in place, now clean and slightly damp. A few flies buzz curiously, but the ash keeps most of them at bay. You pull the reed mat back over the corner. Done. Here's a quirky fact. Archaeologists have found children's toilets made of clay, complete with small seats. These training toilets were often kept indoors, near the hearth. Parents must have known what every modern parent learns eventually. There's no such thing as too close when your toddler's in toilet training. You lie down on your woven mat as the afternoon heat swells. Through the slats in the wall, you watch dust shimmer like gold in the sunlight. You're tired, and the Nile hums like an old lullaby. Somewhere across the village, someone else is emptying their pot, cleaning with ash, rinsing in the canal. The rhythm of waste and water continues, just as it has for thousands of years. And while the pharaohs may have golden sarcophagi, you've got a reliable pot and a path worn smooth by generations of careful feet. It's not glamorous, but it works. You close your eyes, already dreading the lentils. You're in Athens now. Sunlight dances off marble columns. The marketplace hums with arguments about olives and democracy, and someone is loudly reciting poetry near a fig stand. But you're clutching a terracotta pot under your arm, and let's just say you're not looking for applause. This is your sky ballon, a chamber pot, small enough to carry, but just large enough to make walking with it through town absolutely mortifying. You need to dispose of it, and you need to do it without tripping. Private toilets in ancient Greece? Rare. If you're wealthy, you might have a small outhouse behind your home. If you're everyone else, you have a pot and a strong sense of balance. Waste goes out with the daily trash, sometimes flung into the street with a warning shout, sometimes not. You reach the street corner near a public dumping area that smells like fermented figs and regret. You empty the pot and rinse it quickly with a splash of well water. No one blinks. In fact, an old man tips his cup at you as if to say, "Been there." But that pot? That's just part one of your toileting adventure, because now you have to go again, properly. You head to one of the city's few public latrines. It's a rectangular stone structure tucked between shops, roofed with open-air sides and carved seats lined up like an ancient conference table. Each has a circular opening and a trough running beneath, where water sometimes flows. Think communal seating without partitions, just vibes and eye contact. You sit down next to a stranger, knees almost touching, and do your best not to make conversation. But this is Greece. We talk. He's asking what you think of the new statue of Athena. You're wondering whether the sponge stick he's holding is clean. Neither of you is sure. Wiping? That's complicated. Greeks used bits of ceramic known as pessoa, small, rounded stones or shards, sometimes inscribed. Yes, people literally wiped with pottery, occasionally with the names of politicians or enemies etched into them. Call it democratic hygiene. Scholars still debate whether these shards were really used for wiping or as toilet gaming pieces, or both. But it's hard to ignore their placement in archaeological sites, often found near drainage systems, worn smooth from repeated use. One example literally had Aristophanes scratched onto it. Talk about cutting political commentary. You finish up and reach for your own pesos, carefully selected earlier, smooth enough to avoid disaster. A nearby clay pot holds vinegar water for rinsing, shared, of course. You dip the shard and try to avoid eye contact as your neighbor loudly critiques a local poet. Still, it could be worse. This public latrine has at least a drainage system. Many Greek homes didn't. Most waste got tossed into middens, garbage heaps, or dumped in alleyways. Streets often had open gutters for runoff, but in dry seasons they became stagnant pools of yuck. The air could be fragrant in all the wrong ways, and yet, despite all this, personal cleanliness was culturally important. Greek athletes oiled their bodies, bathed daily, and scraped themselves with bronze strigils. But bathrooms? That was another matter. Hygiene was about the outside. The inside, that was private, even if done in public. There's a philosophical edge to this, too. Some Stoic writers reflected on bodily functions as reminders of human equality. Others, like Diogenes the Cynic, went full chaos mode, reportedly defecating in public to reject social norms entirely. You're not quite there yet. You wash your hands in a shallow basin of water near the entrance. No soap, but the act itself matters. There's a spiritual cleanliness associated with purification, especially before entering temples. You don't want to offend the gods with, well, anything lingering. As you leave the latrine, a small boy darts past, carrying a new sky balloon, empty now, but ominously lightweight. Behind you, the sound of clay scraping stone echoes like a strange chorus. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some ancient Greek curse tablets were buried in or near toilets. People literally flushed their enemies into the underworld. Talk about going out with a bang. You make your way back through the agora, the smell of roasting lamb mingling with dust and the faint sour tang of public waste. A breeze cuts through the heat, and you catch yourself sighing in relief, not from comfort, just from not having dropped anything on your sandals. And as the Acropolis looms in the distance, you wonder, did Socrates ever have to carry his own chamber pot through the streets? Probably. You're sitting in a row of stone seats, knees politely angled away from the stranger beside you, and the acoustics in here are surprisingly good. That's because this isn't just a public toilet. It's a social club, a low-rent lecture hall, and an open-air philosopher's salon. Welcome to the ancient Greek latrine again, this time with more ideas and less shame. The marble bench beneath you is cool, and your backside is perched directly over a running water channel. There's no door, no cubicle, no occupied sign, just a long row of holes and a shared understanding. When you've got to go, you've also got to listen. Because in Athens, even the most mundane bodily function gets tangled up in the pursuit of wisdom. The man 2 seats down is quoting Heraclitus, something about rivers and never stepping into the same one twice. The irony isn't lost on you as water burbles beneath your feet, slowly carrying the collective opinions of a dozen squatters toward the city's drainage trenches. It's a strange kind of intimacy. You're not just sharing a space, you're sharing a moment. There's no room for modesty when you're this exposed. Someone sneezes. Someone else sighs in relief. You focus on a crack in the floor and pretend not to notice that the guy beside you just pulled out a sponge stick. Ah, yes, the Greek xylospongion or tersorium, depending on whom you ask. A stick with a sponge tied at the end, soaked in vinegar or salt water, reused by many, sanitized by hope. This sponge was passed from person to person, kept in a communal basin. The belief was that vinegar killed germs, though historians still argue whether it helped or just gave people a false sense of security. What we do know is that public latrines in Greece and later in Rome were often equipped with shared wiping tools. You just had to trust your fellow citizens. There's a philosophical debate happening loudly about whether defecation is a divine equalizer. One man insists that everyone, no matter how wealthy, must bend the knee to nature. Another argues that moderation in diet prevents unseemly urgency, which earns him a chorus of groans from those currently mid-process. You shift uncomfortably, not from embarrassment, but because someone brought up Plato again. In many Greek texts, bodily functions are discussed with a curious blend of frankness and euphemism. The body is flawed, a vessel, but it's also unavoidable. Philosophers use defecation as a metaphor for purification, detachment, or even wisdom. To control your body was noble. To be ruled by it, tragic. Diogenes, always the provocateur, famously defied all toilet taboos. He believed that shame was a social construct. There's a story, possibly exaggerated, that he once relieved himself in the amphitheater, then lectured about naturalism while doing it. You're not going that far, but you feel the tug of his argument while wiping with a vinegary sponge. Nearby, a servant enters with a jug of water and a clay oil lamp. He tops off the basin, nods at the seated patrons, and leaves without a word. You notice that he's careful not to make eye contact. Cleaners in these spaces were usually enslaved or low-caste workers. They maintained the sponge sticks, swept out the basins, and bore the brunt of sanitation's unglamorous side. You wonder how often people got sick here. The answer? Probably often. Communal latrines were breeding grounds for disease, especially in the summer months. But in an era without germ theory, people did what they could. They used vinegar, changed sponges when possible, and performed ritual washings afterward. You finish your business and step outside, blinking in the sharp midday sun. The agora is just beyond the latrine courtyard, bustling with merchants, poets, and pickpockets. You pass a statue of Athena, her marble face eternally serene, and wonder what she would think of today's conversation. Here's a quirky historical tidbit. Scholars have found ancient graffiti inside latrines. Doodles, political jabs, even love notes scratched into the plaster. It seems that toilet stalls have always been prime real estate for anonymous opinions. You walk along the colonnades, sandals clicking against sun-warmed stones, feeling a little lighter in body and just maybe in mind. You've debated, defecated, and dodged a philosophical sponge. That's a full Athenian afternoon, and as you pass a group of young men arguing over poetry and sewage taxes, you can't help but smile. The public latrine might not offer privacy, but it does offer something else, a chance to witness humanity, stripped down, literally and figuratively. You ease yourself down onto a cool slab of marble, heartened by the gentle trickle of running water beneath you. Welcome to Rome, the world capital of engineering. And yes, even the toilets are a triumph of infrastructure. Sort of. You're seated in a forica, one of the Roman Empire's public toilets. It's a long rectangular room, partially open to the sky, lined with polished stone seats that have keyhole-shaped openings. No stalls, no partitions, just you, a dozen strangers, and a shared sense of vulnerability. And under that stone seat, a marvel of ancient plumbing, a fresh water channel running just beneath to carry waste away, probably to the nearest cloaca or city sewer. Above that, another small trench runs along the floor's edge in front of the seats. That's for rinsing your sponge on a stick, the ever-present tersorium. You reach for one, trying not to think too hard about its previous user. It's resting in a communal gutter of water laced with vinegar and salt, bobbing like a particularly unwelcome crouton. You give it a quick swish, grit your teeth, and hope for the best. This is peak Roman sanitation, the Cloaca Maxima. The great sewer of Rome still flows beneath your feet. Built centuries ago, it's an astonishing feat. Massive vaulted tunnels carrying storm water and sewage alike into the Tiber. Some homes and bathhouses connect directly to it. Others, not so much. Historians still argue whether Rome had fully flushable toilets or if most of them were cleaned manually by slaves and sanitation workers, foricari, hauling waste by the bucket. But you're in a public forica, and that means no hauling, just communal everything. And that includes conversation. A man to your left is ranting about a grain shortage. Another is laughing about a gladiator's defeat. To your right, someone reads a love poem aloud. It's a strange intimacy. Romans didn't just accept public defecation, they embraced it. It was normal to do business while doing your business. And speaking of business, you spot a graffiti scratch on the marble near your foot. Marcus is a donkey. Classic. Ancient Roman latrines were often covered in scribbles, jokes, and crude illustrations. Some things truly never change. You look down at your sandals, noting the trench of rinse water snaking along the floor. It's ingenious. Fresh water diverted from aqueducts keeps things moving, both above and below. At least when the system works. In the drier seasons, or if the city's maintenance falters, the whole setup turns from impressive to disgusting overnight. Still, it's better than a pot in the corner. The Romans pioneered urban sanitation on a grand scale. Wealthier homes had latrines that drained to cesspits or sewers. Public baths included toilet blocks, and even amphitheaters had built-in facilities. The empire took poop seriously. And yet, hygiene? Well, you wipe carefully, then rinse the tersorium and set it back in its slot. There's a shallow basin for washing your hands nearby. Soap? Not really. Maybe some ash or oil if you're fancy. You rise, adjust your tunic, and glance around at your fellow latrine-goers. One man's reading from a scroll. Another's napping. You pass a servant who's sweeping beneath the seats with a bundle of reeds tied into a brush. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some foricae had running water with little fountains or decorative tiles. One even had a mosaic that read, "Cave Canem, beware of the dog." The Romans, ever practical, didn't waste an opportunity for interior design, even in the bathroom. As you step out into the bustling street, the scent of roasting chestnuts blends with the faint tang of sewer gas wafting from a grate nearby. Horses clop past. Vendors shout. Life rolls on, organized and chaotic in equal measure. You give a small nod of respect to the stone bench behind you. Not because it was comfortable, it wasn't, but because it represents one of humanity's first real attempts to make waste manageable in a crowded urban world. And while the sponge on a stick still haunts your thoughts, you've got to admit, Rome knew how to move things along. You step through a grand marble arch, steam rising like ghosts around you, and are immediately hit by the scents of olive oil, lavender, and about 40 other people's sweaty skin. Welcome to the Roman Thermae, the bathhouse, where cleansing the body is a public affair, and as you'll soon discover, so is emptying it. The Forica here is tucked into a corner past the frigidarium. It's not separate from the baths. It's part of the whole experience. Clean yourself, relax, socialize, and, yes, relieve yourself, all in one trip. Talk about efficiency. You walk across the heated floors, sandals clicking on patterned mosaics. This bathhouse is upscale, perhaps paid for by a local magistrate trying to win votes. Gilded lamps line the walls. Statues of Venus and Hercules watch over everyone, and there's even a mural of dolphins frolicking in the waves. It's beautiful, if a little distracting, when you just need to go. The Forica here is elegant by Roman standards, the same long stone bench design as the public ones, but polished, clean, and with a better view, maybe even a small window overlooking a courtyard. You slide onto the cool seat, joining the quiet chorus of sighs and occasional laughter echoing off the walls. Two men beside you are deep in conversation about chariot racing. Another is unrolling a scroll and reading aloud. A child, someone's son maybe, counts tiles on the floor. It's a full house, and you're right in the middle of it. Like before, there's a shallow trench at your feet for rinsing your sponge on a stick. The water flows steadily, sourced from a local aqueduct, and smells faintly of vinegar. You use it cautiously, suppressing the instinct to ask, "Was this just used?" But there are no answers here, only trust and vinegar. You do your business. The water underneath flows gently, carrying it away. Maybe toward the cloaca, maybe toward the river. You don't ask. You don't want to know. Historians still argue whether these bathhouse latrines were as clean as they appeared. On the surface, they seem advanced. Regular water flow, waste disposal, even ventilation. But down below, parasites, poor maintenance, and backed-up sewers were not uncommon. A blocked latrine could become a public health nightmare, especially when shared by hundreds of people every day. And yet, people kept coming. Because the bathhouse wasn't just a hygiene spot. It was a social engine. You networked here. You struck deals. You flirted, gossiped, even gave political speeches while wrapped in a towel and clutching a strigil. The Forica was just another room in Rome's open-plan living style. You wipe, rinse the sponge, and return it to its communal basin. Then you reach for the amphora of oil beside the doorway. Not for drinking. You drizzle it over your arms and legs and prepare to scrape it all off again in the next room with a curved bronze blade. That's how Romans bathed. Oil, scrape, repeat. The latrine was just one step in the cycle. As you re-enter the tepidarium, the warm room, the floor, vibrates faintly beneath your feet. That's the hypocaust system, an early form of radiant heating. Furnaces beneath the floor pump hot air through flues, keeping the entire space toasty. You feel like royalty, even if you've just wiped with a stick. Here's your quirky tidbit of the day. Roman bathhouses often featured graffiti inside the latrines, some crude, some clever, some oddly poetic. One fragment reads, "I have come here and had a good fart." Another, "Secundus defecated here." Immortal words etched into eternity. You towel off, passing a row of men lying on benches, eyes closed in post-bath bliss. An attendant hands you a clean cloth, and you nod in thanks. Your skin is oiled. Your stomach is empty. Your dignity is mostly intact. But as you leave, you hear someone calling out, "Did someone take my sponge?" A pause, a collective silence, then laughter, a classic bathhouse moment. Outside, Rome is still roaring. Vendors cry out, coins clink in palms, and oxen pull carts over cobblestones slick from last night's rain. You feel refreshed, lighter in every sense, and grateful to live in a city that, despite its chaos, has found a way to organize the chaos of human need. Because at the end of the day, the bathhouse for Rika is more than a toilet. It's a space where emperors and beggars sit side by side, united by olive oil and awkward eye contact. And in Rome, that's practically equality. You duck your head against the sharp northern wind as you enter a timber-walled hut. It's dim inside, the air thick with peat smoke, and a certain tang that tells you this isn't just a storage shed. Welcome to early medieval Europe, where castles are drafty, chamber pots are leaky, and the toilet is officially known as a garderobe. You spot it in the corner, a narrow stone seat jutting out from the thick outer wall, with a hole leading directly to the great outdoors. Beneath it, a sheer drop into open air or sometimes into a cesspit. Either way, it's not a place you want to linger. You lower yourself cautiously. The stone is freezing. There's no sponge on a stick, no flowing water, no gentle mosaic dolphin to distract you. Just the wind howling up from the hole like a ghost with poor manners. You do your best to balance. The word garderobe literally means wardrobe. And no, that's not a joke. These toilet alcoves were often placed near clothing storage, not out of convenience, but because it was believed the rising ammonia from waste helped kill fleas in the garments. Historians still argue whether that was intentional design or desperate medieval rationalizing. Either way, it's not exactly lavender sachets and cedarwood hangers. You glance around. The walls are stone, the floor is timber, and there's a tiny wooden peg on the wall, maybe to hang your lantern or your dignity. You use a handful of straw or moss, whatever's dry, to wipe. If you're of noble blood, maybe you've got a cloth square that gets rinsed out later. If you're not, well, you make do. Medieval castles often featured garderobes built into the outer walls. Gravity was the main flushing method. Waste dropped directly into the moat or onto a pile known as a midden. And yes, this means moats were not just defensive features, they were also sewage systems. Romantic, isn't it? You finish up and stand, brushing your tunic off and trying not to think about what just happened. Outside, snow dusts the battlements. You step onto a stone corridor and nod at a passing page boy. He's carrying a bucket of ashes, probably headed to one of the lower chambers to scatter them in the cesspit. Ashes helped reduce odor and slow decomposition. Not perfect, but better than nothing. And here's a quirky fact. Some castles had multiple guardrobes stacked vertically, like a medieval high-rise. The problem? If the chute clogged, the upper floors could overflow. Let that sink in. Or actually, let it not sink. That's the problem. Latrines weren't just for nobles. Even peasants in villages had to relieve themselves, often in shared outdoor pits called cesspools, or in open fields if they lived in the countryside. Chamber pots were common, emptied each morning into ditches or heaps. Entire streets in towns like London and Paris had to contend with night soil collectors, men who hauled human waste by the barrel in the dark of night, often dumping it just outside the city. And yet, in monasteries, toilets, called reretorters, were almost sacred. Built into the edges of dormitories, they had flowing water underneath, sometimes even rudimentary flushing systems using diverted streams. Monks took sanitation surprisingly seriously, though silence in the reretorter was still expected. No talking while squatting, it was considered unholy. Back at the castle, you're headed to the great hall, past the kitchens and the butler's pantry. The floor is strewn with rushes, aromatic herbs meant to mask smells. But those herbs are full of crumbs, rat droppings, and, yes, traces of human waste. Because when chamber pots were emptied, not everything landed where it was supposed to. The phrase, throwing the contents out the window, wasn't just poetic, it was routine. In many towns, residents would shout a warning, "Garde l'eau," watch out for the water, before dumping the contents of their pot into the street below. Historians debate whether this phrase eventually morphed into loo, the British slang for toilet. It's not confirmed, but it is fun. You arrive in the hall, and there's a fire crackling, boar roasting, and someone tuning a lute. You feel a little better now, lighter, if nothing else, and you glance back toward the guardrobe tower, grateful for the breeze that carries the worst of the smells away from dinner. Because in medieval Europe, you never really escaped the stench. You just learned how to live around it. Stone walls kept out the wolves, but not always the odors. Life was layered. Meals, music, waste, and worship, all packed under one roof. And when the wind shifts just right, you remember why the guard-robe was built on the leeward side of the castle. The road beneath your feet is muddy, slick, and smells faintly of beer, horses, and something much worse. You're in a medieval European town now, maybe London, maybe Paris, and it's market day. Shouts echo from fishmongers and fur traders. Somewhere a pig screams. But all you care about is finding a place to go. There's no public restroom, no helpful signs, no cute medieval cafe with a key code door. What there is, however, is an alley, narrow, shadowed, and just secluded enough. You duck in, eyes scanning for anything remotely like a latrine. Instead, you find a wall stained with centuries of indignity. You sigh and do what half the town does. Squat where you hope no one will step. This is urban toilet culture, 14th century style. Human waste in medieval towns was everyone's problem and no one's job. Chamber pots were used indoors and emptied into the street or nearby cesspits. If you were lucky, your house backed onto a drain. If you were rich, maybe your chamber pot was made of pewter. If you were very rich, you might even have a stone latrine built over a flowing channel. But 90% of the population, they dumped it out the window. You finish your business, stand up, and back away from the suspicious puddle forming between cobblestones. No wiping this time, not unless you have a rag tucked into your belt or enough coin for a bit of coarse cloth. Most folks just used grass, straw, or grimace, nothing. The term medieval comfort is an oxymoron. Back on the main road, you spot a man with a two-wheeled cart and a long-handled shovel. He's a gong farmer, one of the most dreaded but essential jobs of the time. His work? Emptying cesspits and collecting night soil from barrels, latrine trenches, and wherever else people dumped it. He hauls the waste to the outskirts of town where it's used for fertilizer or disposed of in massive pits called lay stalls. Quirky tidbit here. Gong farmers were paid surprisingly well. The job was revolting but necessary, and they earned more than some skilled tradesmen. The catch? They had to work at night, carry their own tools, and often lived apart from other townsfolk, because nobody wanted to sit next to the guy who shovels poop for a living. You pass a row of houses with upper stories that jut out like crooked teeth. Below, the street gutters run thick with rainwater, dishwater, and waste. Kids splash through barefoot. A dog licks something it really shouldn't. And you suddenly understand why people carried herbs in little pomanders under their noses. Disguising the stench was part of surviving the city. Historians still debate how people coped with such overwhelming filth. Some claim medieval cities were perpetually disease-ridden, while others argue that folks developed resistance or practiced more hygiene than we assume. Soap existed, made from animal fat and lye, but it was expensive. Bathing happened, but not as frequently as modern noses would prefer. And during plague times, all bets were off. You reach the town square where a stone basin stands, a public lavatorium. It's not a toilet, just a water trough. People wash their hands here after market transactions or before meals. Children drink from it. A horse tries to stick its head in. The idea of separating clean and dirty water hasn't quite caught on yet. You spot a young monk standing nearby, his robe damp from the knees down. Monastic communities often had better sanitation than towns. Their latrines were aligned with the rules of order, some even connected to running streams that flushed waste away. Reredators, they were called, quiet, functional, and maintained by lay brothers or novices, a reminder that even in the filth of the city, someone, somewhere, had a better solution. And here's a grim little fact. During major festivals or long church services, people sometimes relieve themselves right where they stood. It's recorded in church archives, pee under pews, soiled robes, and enough stink to rival any tavern. Sacred spaces didn't always mean clean spaces. As the sun begins to set, the city doesn't get quieter, it just smells worse. The refuse thrown from windows bakes all day and seeps into wood and stone, and unless it rains tonight, it'll linger. You head toward the tavern hoping for a corner seat and a chamber pot you don't have to share. You glance down a side street where a sign swings gently, a crescent moon carved in wood. It marks a privy or what passes for one. Inside, a bucket, a hole, or maybe just a dark corner. You'll take it, because here in this muddy, raucous, wonderfully awful medieval town, going to the toilet is an act of strategy. You dodge the smell, the crowds, the judgment, and just hope you don't slip on someone else's morning. You awaken to the hollow clang of a bell and the soft shuffle of feet on flagstones. Dawn is breaking over a Benedictine monastery, and everything is ordered, timed, and quiet. Very, very quiet. You've just begun your novitiate, which means you're learning the rhythms of the monastic life. Prayers, labor, silence, and yes, even where and how to relieve yourself. You walk, robe rustling, down a chilly cloister corridor. The stone beneath your feet is damp with morning dew, and the incense from morning mass still clings faintly to the air. You pass the dormitory, rows of narrow beds, no privacy, and approach a simple wooden door. Behind it, the reredator. This is the monastic toilet block, and it's not an afterthought. It's integrated directly into the architecture, often aligned with the dormitory for easy nighttime access. You step into a long, narrow room built over a stream or trench of flowing water, diverted by monks, of course, with typical medieval ingenuity. You find your seat, just a hole in a wooden bench, polished smooth by generations of quiet use. Below, the water trickles, taking everything downstream toward a distant cesspit or river. No chamber pots here, no servants or peasants to clean up after you. The Benedictine rule encourages self-sufficiency, even in excretion. It's oddly peaceful. The air is fresher than you expected. A few other monks are already seated, silent and still, eyes closed in prayer or focus. No conversation. Speech is restricted. You sit, joining the ritual of quiet relief. You wipe with a cloth kept nearby, perhaps laundered daily by a junior novice. Some re-retorters had small shelves or pegs for cloths or washing bowls. Others were more Spartan, wood, water, and nothing else. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some monasteries had lavatoriums, basins for washing hands, built just outside the re-retorter. These weren't just for hygiene, but part of a larger ritual of bodily purification. Washing before meals, after defecation, even before entering the chapel. Dirt wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. Historians still debate whether these religious sanitation systems were driven by genuine hygiene concerns or ritual purity alone. After all, medieval medicine was still in its infancy. But when compared to townsfolk tossing pots out of windows, the monks come off looking like paragons of cleanliness. You finish up, wash your hands with cold water from a stone basin, and dry them on your robe. Linen towels were for feast days. Then it's back to the refectory, where a silent breakfast of bread and ale awaits. No one comments on the smell, or the lack thereof. In a monastery, you learn to notice what isn't said. As you walk, you pass the scriptorium, where older monks copy texts by candlelight. Some of those texts include medical manuals, including entries on digestion, laxatives, and proper bodily management. The monks weren't just praying, they were studying, and they had a surprisingly detailed knowledge of herbal remedies. Senna leaves, fennel, anise, all used to keep the bowels moving. And yet, even with all this care, monasteries weren't immune to disease. Outbreaks swept through like they did everywhere else. Sometimes the water channels under the re-retorters backed up. Sometimes nearby cesspits leaked. But here, at least, there was a system, a rhythm, a plan. You pause at the chapel doors and offer a quick prayer, not just of thanks, but maybe of relief. Because you've used city streets, castle guard-robes, and the dreaded festival trench latrines. The monastery, for all its strictness, is beginning to feel like a kind of toilet paradise. And still, the day stretches before you. Hours of chanting, kneeling, planting herbs, or illuminating psalms with peacock-colored ink. You'll return to the re-retorter again tonight, just before bed, stepping quietly in line with your brothers, robes fluttering like bats in the candlelight. Because in a world of chaos, war, and foul-smelling streets, the monastery re-retorter is something astonishing, a latrine of peace. You trudge across packed earth, your breath misting in the morning chill, and stop outside a squat wooden hut with smoke curling from its crooked chimney. The year is 1791, and you're in a small colonial American town, muddy, growing, and frankly, a little ripe. Behind the house, tucked beside the barn, stands a simple, weather-worn structure. You know it well. Everyone does. It's the outhouse. You open the door. It creaks in complaint. Inside, a narrow bench with two holes cut in the wood, one big, one small. You were raised to understand which is which. Above the bench, a crescent moon carved in the door lets in a shaft of pale light. You sit. It's cold. The wood beneath you is rough but sturdy, and there's a faint pine scent. Someone must have tossed in fresh shavings recently. Or maybe it's just wishful thinking. The hole opens down into a pit dug by hand. It's several feet deep, and you try not to think too hard about what's down there. You've heard of people dropping things, buttons, pipes, once even a wedding ring. There's no getting them back. Wiping? Corn cobs, maybe a piece of newspaper if someone's been generous. You grab one from the small stack near your elbow and do your business quickly. You can't linger here. It's not the smell that drives you out. It's the spiders. Outside, the sun is climbing. Chickens scatter from your boots. Someone's starting a fire in the smokehouse. Life in the colonies is rough-hewn, practical, and full of compromise. There's no plumbing, no privacy, no lavender-scented candles, just a wooden box with a hole and the knowledge that you'll be digging a new pit in a year or two. And here's your quirky, historical tidbit. In some towns, families painted the crescent moon on women's outhouses and a star on men's. Eventually, the moon became the standard symbol, partly because women's outhouses were better maintained. Yes, early toilet branding based on gendered hygiene habits. You leave the outhouse and toss a handful of lime into the pit. It helps with the smell, they say, though mostly it just makes you feel like you're doing something helpful. Historians still argue whether colonial sanitation was a step forward or a lateral shuffle from medieval practices. Certainly, the individual outhouse was an improvement over chamber pots flung from second-story windows. But diseases like dysentery, cholera, and typhoid were still rampant, especially in towns where outhouses were crammed too close to wells. In the cities, things got worse. New York, Philadelphia. These growing hubs had tenement blocks where dozens of people might share one backyard privy. Waste piled up, seeped into drinking water, and bred outbreaks. Night soil men, yes, still a thing, hauled it away in the dead of night, dumping it into the nearest river, or, more often, the harbor. And yet, people adapted. Some households began experimenting with enclosed closets indoors, equipped with water basins and crude piping. The seeds of modern plumbing were being sown. Back on the homestead, you grab the bucket and head to the well. Water for breakfast, for washing, for scrubbing hands, still smelling faintly of pine and ash. You wipe your hands on your apron and get to work. There's firewood to split, bread to knead, and children already running barefoot through the frost. You glance toward the outhouse, now bathed in gold morning light. It's ugly, it's cold, it's absolutely essential. Because in a world without sewer mains or septic tanks, that little wooden shack is a lifeline, keeping your house and your nose just a little cleaner. You stand in a narrow, gas-lit alley, the clatter of carriage wheels echoing over slick cobblestones, and you breathe in deeply, only to immediately regret it. Welcome to 19th century London, where the city bustles, the fog rolls thick, and the stench is, well, historic. You need to go, badly. But this isn't a place of convenience. You glance around for a public toilet, but unless you're at the train station or a gentleman's club, you're out of luck. So you do what countless others do. You look for a corner, a shadow, anywhere to squat with some semblance of discretion. Urban sanitation is struggling to keep up with explosive growth. The population booms. The toilets, not so much. You duck into a dim alley and find a wall already glistening suspiciously. This is what the city euphemistically calls a pissing corner. There are hundreds, maybe thousands. Some are unofficial. Some are sanctioned, marked with faint signage. All are deeply unpleasant. You relieve yourself quickly. The wall steams faintly in the morning chill. You try not to imagine what's soaking into your boots. Welcome to the age of the Great Stink. It's 1858. The River Thames, the source of the city's drinking water, is also its primary sewer. Raw waste flows directly into it, mixed with animal carcasses, industrial sludge, and everything else the city doesn't want to think about. The smell has become so intense, Parliament has had to hang soaked curtains over the windows and cancel sessions. Cholera outbreaks rage. People are terrified, but of the wrong thing. They believe it's the smell, the miasma, that causes disease, not the bacteria in the water. Historians still debate how long this misunderstanding prolonged the crisis. The public reacts with anger. Newspapers print editorials titled "The Monster Nuisance of All" and "Filth and Foulness." And at last, something extraordinary happens. Enter Joseph Bazalgette, a civil engineer with a plan, a massive one. Over the next decade, he designs and oversees the construction of over 1,000 miles of underground sewers beneath London, rerouting waste away from the city. It's a triumph of engineering, and yes, the Great Stink finally ends. But for now, you're still stuck in the era before all that. In poorer districts, families share a single privy, sometimes over a cesspit, sometimes just a wooden box on bricks. There's no running water, no flush mechanism, no dignity. And if the pit fills, you wait for the night soil men who scrape out the contents in the dark, cart it away, and dump it into the marshes or countryside. Quirky tidbit of the day. Londoners in the 1800s bought urine pots made of ceramic with slogans like "Use me well" painted on the inside. Some even had lids that looked like faces, cheerful if vaguely horrifying. Meanwhile, if you're middle class and forward-thinking, you might install a water closet, a toilet with a wooden seat, lead piping, and a rudimentary tank overhead. But unless your home connects to a reliable drain, it's just a fancy way to fill your basement with sewage. You walk toward the edge of the Thames, where tide and filth swirl together in a brown sloshing stew. Rag pickers comb the banks for bones and scraps. Children splash in the shallows. Somewhere, a tea shop brews water from this very river. You suddenly lose your appetite. The city's beginning to change, though. In 1848, the Public Health Act was passed, encouraging towns to build sewer systems and improve sanitation. Not mandatory, of course, but it's a start. As you make your way home, you pass one of the newer urinals for men. Small cast-iron booths with slotted sides. No privacy, but better than a wall. Women, still out of luck. Public toilets for them won't arrive in force for decades, sparking furious debates over propriety, morality, and whether ladies have bodily functions at all. You reach your flat, narrow, drafty, shared with 2 other families. In the backyard, a wooden closet with a brick base. Inside, a metal bucket. That's your toilet. You use it, cover it, and hope someone else volunteers to carry it out this week. Because here in the great city of London, capital of empire, marvel of industry, the most advanced feature of your toilet is the handle on the bucket. You step onto a polished wooden floor lit by gas chandeliers and adjust your waistcoat as a chambermaid leads you discreetly down the hotel corridor. It's 1890, and you're staying in a luxury suite in Chicago, a booming city of innovation, soot, and new ideas about where to put the bathroom. The maid gestures to a small side door. "The water closet, sir," she says, curtsying. You nod politely and slip inside. It's miraculous. The walls are tiled in soft white. A small porcelain basin sits on a metal stand flanked by folded towels and a bar of carbolic soap. But the real star of the room? A full, gleaming porcelain throne, complete with a wooden seat and an overhead cistern connected by an elegant brass pipe. You take a moment just to admire it. This is the High Victorian Water Closet, or WC, and it's not just a toilet. It's a technological triumph, a sign that civilization is finally learning how to keep its waste and its dignity indoors. You sit. The bowl is smooth, surprisingly warm. You flush, pulling a chain that releases a satisfying roar of water from above. The contents vanish downward, whisked away by a properly siphoned pipe. You stand, marveling at the efficiency. No pit, no bucket, no sponge. This is plumbing perfection. The idea of indoor toilets isn't new, but this generation has finally made it workable. Alexander Cummings patented the S-bend in 1775, creating a water seal that keeps sewer gases from rising back up the pipe. Joseph Bramah added a better flushing mechanism, but it wasn't until the late 19th century that indoor toilets became widespread among the middle class. Of course, not everyone's on board. Many still fear that the smells from a water closet will spread disease. Those lingering miasma theories die hard. Historians still argue whether Victorian plumbing practices were more about hygiene or social class signaling. Having a flush toilet wasn't just convenient, it was a status symbol. Here's your quirky fact. Victorian ladies' magazines ran articles on toilet etiquette, including how to gracefully enter a lavatory, how long was too long, and whether or not one should speak of using the WC. Answer: one should not. Outside of fancy hotels and new suburban homes, most people still use chamber pots. In tenement housing, outhouses remain the norm, often shared by dozens of families. Poor ventilation, overuse, and improper drainage turn them into breeding grounds for cholera, typhoid, and worse. You exit the water closet and cross to the washstand. You scrub your hands. Soap is finally accepted as a hygiene essential, and pat dry with a monogrammed towel. You feel like royalty. And yet, even here in the Gilded Age, sanitation is a tale of two cities. On one side, marble-floored bathrooms, flushing toilets, perfumed air. On the other, overflowing alleyway privies and reeking cesspools. In the cities, sewer systems are finally catching up. Chicago raised entire buildings to lay proper drainage. London, as you've seen, built an underground labyrinth. New York, Boston, and Paris follow suit. The modern city is learning to manage its waste, slowly but surely. You walk downstairs to the hotel lobby. A sign near the front desk points guests to gentlemen's facilities and ladies' retiring rooms. You notice, with a smirk, that the ladies' sign uses no direct words for what's inside. Still too scandalous, apparently. Outside, the city bustles. Streetcars clatter. Horses pull cabs. Steam hisses from grates. Somewhere not far from here, a factory is experimenting with the first public restroom for women. The idea of toilets for all is still a political minefield, but it's growing. You stroll past the dining room, glance back toward the polished corridor, and think, maybe we're finally getting this right, at least for those who can afford it. You step into a bright white room that hums faintly, like a machine waiting to breathe. It's the year 1954, and you're inside a brand new suburban home just outside Los Angeles. The house smells of paint, dust, and promise. And the bathroom? It's a marvel of post-war optimism. Pink tile, shiny chrome fixtures, a pastel-colored toilet, seafoam green maybe, or a soft coral blush. Welcome to the golden age of indoor plumbing, where every family finally gets their own throne. You close the bathroom door, a solid wood panel with a shiny brass knob, and take in the fixtures like you're surveying a showroom. There's a matching sink and a gleaming tub with separate knobs for hot and cold. The toilet is low and sleek, with a tank that flushes at the press of a lever. No more overhead chains, no more rattling pipes, just a low, confident whoosh as everything disappears into the municipal sewer line. You sit down, and the plastic seat is cool, but not unpleasant. A roll of soft, perforated toilet paper hangs within reach. Not newspaper, not corn cobs, Actual paper, designed for comfort and cleanliness. You wipe, flush, and wash your hands with rose-scented soap. You dry them on a terry cloth towel, monogrammed if you're the proud sort. The 1950s bathroom is a symbol of achievement. Indoor plumbing had finally reached a point where it wasn't just functional, it was fashionable. Bathrooms became design statements, boasting colored fixtures, tile mosaics, even space-age touches like Formica counters and fluorescent lights. If you couldn't afford a Cadillac, at least you could have a toilet in Sunset Peach. Historians still debate whether the 20th century's toilet revolution was driven more by consumerism than necessity. Advertisements sold bathrooms as places of leisure and self-care, your private sanctuary. Plumbing wasn't just about waste, it was about identity. Here's a quirky detail. Some homeowners in the 1950s installed his and hers toilets, side by side. A strange twist on intimacy. Others created elaborate powder rooms, half bathrooms near the living room meant purely for guests. Hosting was a performance, and that extended to the porcelain. But for all its glossy modernity, suburban sanitation relied on a massive infrastructure hidden underground. Sewage treatment plants expanded to meet growing demand. Septic tanks served rural homes, and companies like Kohler and American Standard became household names. You step back into the hallway, carpet soft beneath your socks, and hear the radio in the kitchen. A woman's voice sings about a better life, a cleaner home, a happier you. And toilets, whether you admit it or not, are part of that dream. Yet outside this pastel-tiled sanctuary, the reality is less perfect. Many rural communities still lack indoor plumbing. In parts of the American South, black families are forced to use outhouses or makeshift facilities. In cities, overcrowded tenements still share single toilets per floor. The plumbing revolution is real, but it's not evenly distributed. And there are whispers of environmental concerns. Wastewater treatment isn't perfect. Rivers downstream from growing suburbs grow foul. But for now, those problems feel far away, buried beneath optimism and 100 shiny new toilets. As you glance one last time at the gleaming ceramic bowl, you realize, for the first time in history, going to the toilet is no longer something to endure. It's something to design, to enjoy, to celebrate, and maybe, just maybe, to take for granted. You press a button and hear the soft whir of motors engaging. The lid lifts itself. A small jet of water hums to life. Welcome to Tokyo 2023, where toilets aren't just appliances. They're works of art, technological marvels engineered for your ultimate comfort. You settle onto the warm seat with a sigh of disbelief. Heated, contoured, and self-sanitizing, it feels less like a toilet and more like a first-class lounge chair. There's a control panel on your right with more buttons than your TV remote. Bidet, rear wash, oscillate, air dry, deodorize. and something labeled music. You press it. Gentle flute music begins playing. You laugh softly. This is next level. These smart toilets, pioneered by companies like Toto, are standard in Japanese homes and public spaces. They automatically open when you approach, close when you leave, and clean themselves in between. Some even analyze your urine and track your health. You finish your business and hit the cleanse button. A perfectly calibrated stream of warm water does its work. No toilet paper required, though it's there if you want it. You air dry, stand, and the toilet flushes itself with a cheerful tone. No germs, no mess, no awkward handle jiggling. It's efficient, it's polite, it's oddly soothing. Historians still debate how Japan came to embrace this level of toilet luxury, while much of the world stuck with basics. Some say it's cultural, a reverence for cleanliness dating back to Shinto traditions. Others point to urban density and engineering prowess. But either way, Japan now sets the global bar for bathroom technology. Quirky fact time: in Japan, public restrooms often include sound princess devices, machines that emit fake flushing noises to mask natural sounds. Why? Because people, especially women, often felt embarrassed to be heard. The government even promoted them for water conservation, to stop people from flushing just for noise. As you leave the stall, you notice a small screen above the sink. It displays water temperature, soap usage, and even compliments your hand-washing technique. "Great job," it says in soft English. You raise an eyebrow and chuckle. And it's not just in homes. Japanese train stations, department stores, even remote hiking cabins feature pristine high-tech toilets. Some include baby seats, accessibility aids, and changing tables built right into the stall. The level of thoughtfulness is staggering. Meanwhile, in many parts of the world, toilet inequality still looms. Billions of people lack access to safe, private sanitation. Diseases like cholera and dysentery remain rampant in areas without proper sewage systems. Modern Japan stands as both a marvel and a reminder of that global gap. You step back into the neon glow of the Tokyo night. The city pulses with efficiency. Trains arriving to the second, vending machines offering hot soup, and yes, bathrooms that clean you better than your own hands. But even in this high-tech age, you notice something ancient: a folded paper crane left gently on the sink. A quiet, human touch. A reminder that no matter how advanced the toilet becomes, the act itself remains humbling, universal, grounding. Because whether it's a Roman sponge, a wooden bench over a stream, or a self-washing porcelain seat that bows when you leave, the story of toilets is the story of us trying to be a little more comfortable in a world that often isn't. You tighten your hiking boots and adjust your backpack as the wind whips past your ears. You're on a remote trail somewhere in the Rockies, miles from the nearest road, surrounded by trees, rocks, and the kind of silence that rings in your bones. Nature is stunning. Nature is powerful. Nature, unfortunately, offers you no toilet. You feel the first stirrings of an urgent biological truth. It's time to go. There's no outhouse, no flushing toilet, no convenient cafe with a restroom key, just forest, dirt, and the growing realization that you should have planned better. You veer off the path, finding a discreet spot at least 200 feet from the trail and any water source. Because even in the wild, leave no trace ethics are king. You dig a small hole with your boot heel or, if you're wise, the trowel you packed, 6 inches deep, 8 if you had beans last night. You squat. You try not to make eye contact with a curious squirrel. You do your business. Then comes the tricky part, wiping. If you've brought biodegradable toilet paper, great. If not, you're improvising. Leaves, snow, maybe a smooth river rock. You laugh a little at how quickly standards fall in the wilderness. You bury everything in the hole, refill it with soil, and press it flat with your boot. Then you walk away like nothing ever happened. Welcome to the ancient and still very relevant world of open defecation. Even today, roughly 400 million people worldwide still go outdoors, by necessity, not choice. From Himalayan foothills to parts of rural Africa, sanitation infrastructure is lacking. Historians still argue whether modern sanitation systems can be universally implemented without local adaptations, and whether Western-style plumbing is always the best fit. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some remote Tibetan villages, waste is collected in open containers and dried for fuel. Dung fires warm homes. Nothing is wasted. Literally. Back on the trail, you refill your water bottle at a stream and thank yourself for purifying it first. In developing regions, the lack of toilets isn't just inconvenient, it's deadly. Contaminated water leads to millions of preventable deaths each year, particularly among children, which is why toilets, humble, unglamorous toilets, are one of the most effective public health tools ever invented. The world is starting to catch on. Composting toilets, pit latrines with ventilation, low-cost sanitation kits. NGOs and governments are investing in infrastructure that doesn't require full plumbing systems. Because building a sewer grid takes time and money, and people need solutions now. You stop to rest beside a ridgeline and notice a composting toilet, a wooden structure with a simple flap seat and a container of sawdust. You marvel at the design. No water, no smell, just a dry, odor-controlled space that lets nature do the work. You use it, toss in a scoop of sawdust, and close the lid. Simple, smart, satisfying. And you realize something profound. Even here, miles from civilization, humanity is finding ways to go with dignity. Because no matter how far we walk from our cities, castles, or moonlit outhouses, the need to relieve ourselves and to do so safely, cleanly, respectfully, never changes. In fact, it might be the most human thing of all. You blink beneath fluorescent lights as a low hum fills the air. You're in a hospital now, modern, sterile, white, and the room is filled with beeping machines, clipboards, and a neatly folded curtain that divides one patient's bed from the next. A nurse walks past briskly. Somewhere, a heart monitor chirps like a digital cricket. You're not here for treatment, you're here for the toilet. You step into the adjoining bathroom, a compact, accessible space designed for bodies that might be injured, aching, or weak. There are grab bars on every wall, a lowered sink, a red emergency pull cord. The toilet itself, taller than average, with reinforced sides and a raised seat. Clinical but kind. You sit, slowly. Everything here is built for function over flair. The toilet paper is thin, the flush a subdued whoosh. But the design matters. It's meant to help people who can't always squat or balance or wipe. This is the quiet, overlooked world of medical sanitation. In hospitals, toilets are more than convenience. They're tools of healing. Toilets are evaluated for ease of use, fall prevention, and hygiene. Infection control is paramount. Stainless steel surfaces, automatic flushes, and touch-free soap dispensers are standard, not luxuries. You finish up, wash your hands thoroughly, and study the sink's design. It's deep to prevent splashes. The faucet activates with a wave. Even the mirror is angled so that someone in a wheelchair can see themselves. Quirky fact for today: some hospitals in Scandinavia install built-in bidets for patients recovering from surgery or giving birth. Nurses call them independence boosters. Historians still debate whether the future of toilet care lies more in technological automation or in human-centered design. Either way, dignity is the goal. In long-term care homes, adult diapers, commode chairs, and bedpans become routine. It's a delicate balance, helping without humiliating. Some patients laugh it off. Others mourn the loss of privacy, of control. It's here, more than anywhere else, that the toilet becomes a symbol of what aging can take. And in psychiatric wards, toilets are bolted down, plumbing is recessed, and materials are tamper-proof to prevent self-harm. Even the most basic bathroom layout is a conversation between safety and humanity. Meanwhile, architects and planners around the world are rethinking what accessible really means. Not just ramps and wide doors, but neurodivergent friendly lighting, scent-free soaps, or gender-neutral stalls that don't make people choose between safety and identity. Back outside the hospital bathroom, you watch an elderly man walk slowly with a nurse. He's wheeled past the hallway toilet, declines, and heads for his room. He's waiting for the one he knows, the one with a rail in just the right spot. We take it for granted, but when the body starts failing, when arthritis stiffens your hips, or chemo leaves you too dizzy to squat, where and how you go becomes a daily negotiation. Toilets in the medical world aren't just porcelain furniture. They're therapy, recovery, a second chance at normal. You leave the room with new respect. The nurse nods at you. Someone flushes gently behind the curtain, and you think, this humble seat, cold, quiet, and stainless, is more essential to human dignity than half the machines down the hall. You blink as the stall door clicks shut behind you. The air is cool, the lighting soft, and you're no longer in a hospital, hotel, or home. You're in a gender-neutral, all-access, high-tech public restroom in the heart of a bustling modern city. Maybe Berlin, maybe San Francisco. The walls are sleek, graffiti-resistant. The floor, heated. The stall, fully enclosed, floor to ceiling, sound dampened. You've entered the future, or at least the present, of public sanitation. There's no gap under the door, no awkward foot shadows, no embarrassment about noises, odors, or glances at the wrong moment. Just you, your thoughts, and the warm hum of a toilet seat that's probably smarter than your phone. You sit, noticing the ambient music piped in at a whisper, part elevator jazz, part rain sounds. A voice gently instructs you how to flush in 3 languages. You smile. Public restrooms have come a long way from the urine-slick trenches of medieval towns and the mud-walled outhouses of the frontier. And yet, the modern toilet isn't just a story of convenience. It's one of design, dignity, and debate. You notice a touchless toilet paper dispenser, an optional bidet wand, and a shelf with free menstrual products. These details weren't always standard. In fact, many still aren't. But growing awareness of equity, gender identity, and disability access is reshaping how we think about a simple toilet stall. Quirky fact: the term bathroom is used almost exclusively in American English. Brits say loo, Aussies go for dunny, and in much of the world it's just toilet, because that's what it is. Historians still debate whether euphemisms like restroom help reduce stigma or just delay uncomfortable conversations. You stand, flush with a wave of your hand, and turn to wash. The sink is integrated right into the stall. Touch-free soap, warm water, air dryer. No shuffling to a communal trough of questionable faucets. Privacy maintained from entry to exit. It's not just about tech either. Across cities, municipalities are rethinking who gets to use public toilets safely. For people experiencing homelessness, a clean toilet is often their only refuge of normalcy. Some cities now offer 24-hour staffed hygiene stations. Others provide mobile toilet trucks. A few even install smart toilets that self-clean between uses, though these often come with timers to discourage loitering. You walk past the urinals, not open, but walled in, with modesty panels and splash guards. Gendered spaces are fading. More people are advocating for all-gender restrooms, not as novelty, but as necessity. For trans folks, parents with kids, people with personal care aides. But progress is uneven. In many rural regions, restrooms still lag, cramped, outdated, even unsafe. And globally, billions still lack access to any toilet at all. It's a brutal reminder that while your stall may have heated floors and aromatherapy, others squat in fields with a plastic bag. You exit to daylight, stepping back into the rush of the city. The restroom blends back into the wall, unassuming, clean, unmarked by the stress and shame that used to follow such spaces. You realize this isn't just a toilet, it's a declaration. A toilet that works, that welcomes everyone, says, your body belongs here. Your needs matter. You deserve this moment of quiet, clean, human comfort. And in a world full of noise, judgment, and rushing crowds, that is revolutionary. You step into the quiet hum of your own bathroom. The year is now. The world outside spins with AI headlines, climate alerts, billion-dollar satellites, and yet here you are, closing the door on everything for a moment of deeply human privacy. The tiles are cool underfoot. The mirror is slightly fogged from your earlier shower. You sit, not with urgency, but out of habit, out of rhythm. The porcelain is warm enough. The flush is silent. You barely think about it. And that's the marvel, isn't it? For most of human history, going to the toilet wasn't simple. It was dangerous, inconvenient, public, or humiliating. You crouched over ditches, hung your rear out castle walls, balanced above icy pits, dusty trenches, communal planks, and, once, an open-air bench above a Roman sewer. But not here, not now. The toilet has become part of the architecture of modern dignity, so seamlessly embedded that we forget how hard-fought its journey has been. And it's still evolving. Maybe you've got a water-saving dual flush, or a bidet add-on that spritzes with surgical precision. Maybe your toilet lights up at night, plays white noise, or analyzes your urine to suggest more fiber in your diet. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's just a clean bowl, a lockable door, a working handle, and maybe that's enough. But somewhere else in the world, right now, a girl is skipping school because there's no toilet at her village's only classroom. A laborer in a dense city is crouching between dumpsters. A family is digging a new pit latrine under a thatched roof. Historians still argue whether global sanitation will ever be universal. The solutions are there: composting toilets, dry toilets, container-based systems, city-wide sewer reform. The will, the money, the infrastructure, often lagging. Your quirky fact: in 2001, the United Nations declared access to clean sanitation a human right. And yet, over 3 billion people still lack safe toilet facilities. That's not a technology problem, that's a humanity problem. So tonight, as you finish up, wash your hands and reach for a towel, consider this. The toilet beneath you is one of the greatest inventions in human history. Not because it's clever or sleek or Japanese, but because it lets you live with health, privacy, and a little bit of dignity. And it's humbling to realize How many are still waiting for that? Now, close your eyes. Let the sound of flowing water fade into a gentle stream. The smell of old stone and lavender soap drifts away. The moonlight returns through Roman arches, flickers past medieval castle walls, glints on the chrome of a Tokyo bidet, and settles quietly on the tiled floor beneath your feet. You've traveled through centuries tonight, through clamor and silence, filth and innovation, shame and pride. You've squatted beside ancient hearths and sat on heated thrones. You've held your nose in alleyways and smiled at self-flushing marvels. You've seen what we flush and what it reveals about us. Because in the end, toilets are more than plumbing. They're rituals, rites, daily reminders that the body has needs, and meeting those needs with care is the quiet heart of civilization. And now, as your breathing slows and your thoughts grow softer, picture a tiny candle flickering near an ancient latrine. A monk walks by in silence. A child balances above a trench. A traveler sighs with relief in a public stall. Different worlds, all connected by the same small human moment. The world may be messy, fast, loud, but here, in this final pause before sleep, you've touched something universal. So rest now. Sink into the sheets. Let your dreams drift downstream with the current. You are warm, safe, clean, and connected. Tomorrow will come. But for now, flush the day behind you.